What's going on, everybody? Kevin Walsh back here for the New York Sports Machine. NFL free agency day one, come and gone, and quite a bit of moves made. A lot of people changing teams. Some guys going back to their teams, but so many big moves being made. We're going to talk about the Jets though, where they have lost a pair of guys in free agency. There's a guy they still need to sign, but they brought in a big time player. Let's start with the players that they lost. Now, within the past 2 days with the free agency and everything, Chris Ivory to the Jaguars, and they've also lost Damon Harrison over to the Giants. Both losses definitely hurt, but they obviously, as I'm going to mention, they addressed the Chris Ivory loss. Damon Harrison too. It's weird. Those guys were both really big pieces for the Jets last year, but when you look at the Jets running backs, obviously, they bring in Matt Forte, and we'll break that down in a couple seconds. So they're fine. Losing Chris Ivory, at the end of the day, probably for the better. I would rather have Matt Forte for 2 seasons than Chris Ivory for the next 2 seasons. I really like Forte. I think he's still got a lot left. Even though he's 30, if Forte till he's 32, I'd be very happy with that. And you look at Harrison, obviously one of the best D tackles against the run, but with the way the defensive line for the Jets is set up, they have the ability to lose a player like that, and you still feel pretty confident in their D line. You got Richardson, Muhammad Wilkerson, franchise tagged, and they're now probably going to definitely make sure that they bring him back. And Leonard Williams, last year's best player in the draft. By a lot of people, the best player, maybe not a quarterback in the draft. They got him all the way at 6, and now he has to step into a bigger role. He did pretty good year 1. Year 2, a lot more pressure on him, but Leonard Williams, really talented player, and he should be able to step up and make that happen. They and now you see though they bring in Matt Forte, and just a great signing. He's a 3-down back, can do it all, and it forces teams to respect a run, but you can leave him in there on 3rd down, which was something that the Jets got away from with Ivory, and they had to focus a bit more on Bilal Powell, who is now a free agent. There's a lot of teams interested in signing Powell, and that definitely means that the Jets are going to need to get another back, though, who can take some of the pressure off of Matt Forte, still 30 years old, can do it all, and at the end of the game, he won't be leaving the field. But, there are going to be a couple drives, couple plays where you want to give Forte a bit of a rest. Don't want to run him into the ground, obviously. You got to be smart about that. You're not doing 300 carries for Matt Forte. So you definitely want to be wise and acquire, whether it be through the later rounds in the draft or free agency. Maybe you get a guy like Ronnie Hillman who's out there and not a lot of people are all too high on. Bring him in, back up Forte, and I mean, Ronnie Hillman's still not too bad where he can still contribute. I definitely feel to the team, so that would be a pretty solid signing, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it. The one big question mark that remains for the New York Jets, though, is Ryan Fitzpatrick. You look at the deal Bradford got, you look at the deal Osweiler got, and Fitzpatrick is looking for a bigger deal than both those guys. Once it seems near $20 million a season, and the Jets are just not willing to give him that. And it's a really tough situation. Fitz wants to finally be paid like a starting quarterback. But did he really earn that when you think about it? When you look at just the pieces that surrounded him, one, he had a phenomenal defense. The Jets had a phenomenal defense last season. But offensively, 1,000-yard rusher in Chris Ivory with Decker and Brandon Marshall out there, the best receiving core for Jets in history, and probably the best receiving duo in all of the National Football League last season. And, how much credit are you going to give to Fitzpatrick when the Jets were in a playing game against the Bills last game of the season, and it didn't go too well. Threw 4 picks and cost them that spot. Look at the Jets' record last year and look at the teams who they won against and their schedule. They had statistically proven, the easiest schedule in the entire NFL last year. They didn't really beat many good teams. They barely beat a good team. Outside of the Patriots, you would really struggle to find an impressive victory for that group. And that says a lot. You beat the Browns, the Jaguars, the Titans. You beat the Colts, and at the beginning of the year, that looked impressive, but then as the season rolled on, that turned out that the way Andrew Luck was playing, They probably should have beat him. So a tough spot, really, to look at Fitzpatrick and say this is our guy moving forward. However, how can the Jets let him go? He was so good last year, in regards to just commanding the offense, and obviously had a career year. And it's really a situation where the Jets don't want to bring Geno back in, obviously. You don't really want to start testing out Bryce Petty. Do you really want to take a risk in free agency? And you look at the other quarterbacks that are out there on the market, RG3, Colin Kaepernick. I don't know how happy Jets fans will be about that. So they're in a really tough spot. It's going to be interesting. That is probably, for Jets fans, the biggest thing to be following now is this Fitzpatrick talk and who the Jets' other options might be. Comment down below. What do you think about the Forte signing? What do you think about Ivory and Harrison moving to new teams? And what do you think about Fitzpatrick? Do you want him back? Does he need to go? If he does go, where does he land? Comment that all down below. I'll see you next time.